Hello again, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lauren, and I'm one of the assistants here with MIT Executive Education. It is my pleasure to bring to you today a webinar titled Harnessing Choice to Thrive as a Leader. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping announcements to cover. First, if you'd be so kind to share where you're joining us from today in the chat box, we'd love to get a sense of where everyone is. Second, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A button strictly for questions. All other conversation can be put in the chat box. Please note, however, that we cannot guarantee that all questions will be addressed during this webinar, but we will address them in a blog post later on. Third, we are recording this webinar. Please keep an eye on your emails. We will provide a link to the recording in the upcoming days. And finally, this event is being captioned. You may toggle the closed captions on and off by selecting the closed caption icon in your Zoom taskbar. And that is it for announcements. So let me turn it over to our Director of Executive Programs, Rob Diatel.
Thank you, Lauren, and welcome everybody. It's just wonderful to see so many people saying hello from all over the world. I think we have over 1,000 people joining us for today's webinar, and really delighted to see such a great turnout from all over the world. It's really wonderful to welcome you to the program today. Today's topic, harnessing choice to thrive as a leader. Very important in the context of great change and uncertainty. People really need to show up differently as leaders. And I think today there's a tendency to think first about the quantitative side, thinking about data science and analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But those, while they're important, aren't exclusively important. There's a really important reason and impetus to focus on the human side as well, and what you bring to the table as a leader. And we're really going to dive deeply into that topic in a very short period of time here today. We're going to be joined by Aithan Shapira, who's a lecturer in the work and organization studies here at MIT Sloan Executive Education. And Aithan is really well known for so many reasons. In addition to being an internationally acclaimed artist and lecturer here at MIT Sloan, he also does extensive work as a facilitator and an executive coach. His background really brings unique perspective to the topic of leadership. And he brings this experience and expertise to the world in many different ways through his consulting work that he does, but also serving on McKinsey's think tank for advancing adult learning and development. He's worked with a number of schools, and we're really pleased to have him here at MIT Sloan with us. He just recently launched a new program, Unlocking the Power of Perspectives. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, this program is running again December 8th and 10th. So if you're intrigued by what we cover, again, in just a very short period of time today, we'd encourage you to explore that program and possibly sign up and really spend some more time with Aithan digging even deeper into this topic. I had the pleasure, it's wonderful to be moderating the webinar today. I had the pleasure of meeting Aithan several years ago when he ran a workshop here at MIT at the MIT Leadership Center. And in all my years at MIT Sloan, it still ranks as one of the most important and impactful experiences that I've had. It really opened my eyes in so many ways in terms of creativity, leadership, the arts, and what we can learn from that. So without any further ado, I know Aithan has much to cover. Aithan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, MIT Executive Education. Rob, it's such a pleasure to grow and learn and be together with you. So thank you for having me here, and to everybody calling it. I'm just so great. It's so great to see everyone, like Rob said, from all different parts of the world. And what I'd love to dig into, because we have a short amount of time together, like Rob's saying today, is what does it mean when we talk, what am I saying when I'm saying harnessing choice to thrive as a leader? And I'd like to, in the first 10 minutes here, just really unpack what that means around what does that mean around choice, and what does it mean in terms of leadership right now? Why is this important right now? And then hopefully we can get into a couple of practices. I'd love to do about 2 practices and tools that we can kind of orient ourselves around and kind of practice together as we go. So I'm going to invite us as much as you can to please use the chat when you can. There'll be a couple moments to get our fingers ready to type as quickly as we can so that we can build these things together and have a community with so many of us from all over. So I think to start to present what I mean about harnessing choice, it would be really good to start with an example of something that I see, which is a real robust example of how we can harness more choice as leaders. And what's going on? What do I mean by this? So in 2019, there was an Ocean Plastic Leadership Summit, specifically with the UN, working with the UN and their sustainable development goals to eradicate or to eliminate the flow of plastic into the ocean. And I was on with a team of facilitators, designers from similar, quite literally all over the world, bringing 160 to 170 experts, leaders across the industry, multiple stakeholders from different places to come together to kind of discuss in a summit what we're going to do and start to take action together. So why is this a good example of that? Because normally if you're going to do a summit, you're going to say we often focus on how do we design more creativity, for more creative and innovative solutions. And what I'm suggesting is that's not enough, because it's inextricable. Designing for those things is inextricable from designing for our development as people and as humans. What do I mean by development in humans? What Robert Keegan might say, who formerly at Harvard, expert in adult development, is he might say we have two jobs. And the first job is doing the job we got hired to do. Right, so everyone shows up. We've all been in conferences and summits where everybody comes in. We've got our suits on. We've got our business cards in our pocket. We're representing something, and we have a kind of a limited number of choices for how we're going to show up. Because the second job that we all have to do is looking good at job number one, looking good at the job we got hired to do, and we spend a lot of energy, the way Keegan would say, in job number two, looking good at the job we got hired to do. So we show up, we've got the suit, and what's that's doing is it's starting to limit our choice of how I'm going to interact with you, and limit my choice about how my capacity to grow and relate with another person. And if we don't design to break that down or to support that in a way that allows us to be more creative, just design. You could have the best design you have for how to be creative and how to be innovative, but that job number two keeps getting in the way, and it's inextricable. So what do we do? If you're looking at the picture in the background, you see that there's a ship. We put everybody on a ship together, and we went out to the Atlantic Gyre where there's plastic in the center of the ocean. We got on dinghies and we snorkeled with the plastic. And then we got up, everybody literally had to take off one suit and put on their snorkeling suits and get back on. It starts to break the barriers and give us more choices of how I can communicate with you. And very specific, when we're talking about our ability to increase choice, what we're doing is, as the context is evolving in the world that's changing really fast, if I have limited my choices of how I'm going to relate with you and with others, I'm limiting what's possible for myself, for you, for the organization, for the people around me, and for the big missions that we have, the big visions for the changing our world. So it's not just increasing choice, but what are we doing and why is this so important? It's we're shifting the perspective of myself when I mature in my leadership, and shifting the perspective of how I relate with you, how I relate. That, orienting to that, supports us in becoming more creative, supports us in becoming more innovative and solving. That's the thing that's limiting our choice of how I'm going to relate to myself and others, is perhaps the leading challenge in what's possible for how we're going to solve the ocean plastics challenge in this case. So I want to just hold that for a moment, because that's both professional and it applies personally. And it applies, and it has likely more value than our abstract cognition, right? So our ability to have more complex systems and maps and theories and models. And in fact, my ability to do that, where we train to do that, build new systems and maps, and everyone on the ship who's an expert and has all these new ways of seeing the systems, their ability to see the system out there is actually limiting their way to relate with each other right here. Because everybody's coming into a room, often we all come into it. If you just heard what I had to say, then everything would just get solved. So how do I invite, what might I have to let go of in order to invite a new perspective for myself and a new perspective for us? That's the thing that we're talking about. So at MIT, what Rob described as the course that we're just touching on shortly here is unlocking the power of my perspectives, of perspectives that allows us to collaborate creatively with clarity to solve significant problems, right? For ourselves, for each other, for the planet. So I'd love to see you there. And if we can, there's going to be Rob or the team at MIT, could you please put the link in the chat to this course? So I'd love to see you there. And in the meantime, what else am I doing? So my relationship at MIT is really, I'm experimenting with progressive ways for training leadership, like this course. And we're committed to the artful transformation of leaders and culture. And so here's where this is showing up in our literature. And I kind of touched on this. So what do I mean by where this is showing up? The choice challenge that we're talking about and building more of it for me to operate in a new way. So, Sloan Management Review article recent by Amy Webb, 11 macro sources of disruption. So we look at this chart, and one of the things it's showing is that technology is the big significant one on this chart. Among all of these that are disrupting at any moment, in every moment, our organization, your organization, right? And you can also add to that, I believe, it's disrupting you. And perhaps another way to look at this chart and what we're seeing is that the external world out there, all those things, those are the things that are changing at speed. Those are the things that are being disrupted. And the dissonance that you experience, that I experience in our leadership, right? And not just leadership hierarchy, but how I present and connect with others. That part can't keep up. It doesn't change as fast. It has less choices than the exterior world, right? So the exterior world has more choices than I do when we talk about choice. And when the exterior choices are changing, my role, right? We talked about that, my role, my identity. If I asked you, hey, how are you doing today? You might say, oh, well, here's my job, and this is what's going on in my job. Here's my family. You pick the things that we identify as, and we talk about those. And what happens is when I'm a parent, when I present myself as a parent, when I present myself as my affiliation with a job and an organization, those things have ways that I believe are the correct ways for being. And right there, I've limited. Now, it's not only negative. That's a good thing in a lot of ways. Part of it is as I become more of an expert in a field, my choices are also getting limited in certain ways, right? In that field, when we look at that chart around us, any one of those charts, I could become an expert at technology. But what I'm thinking about in terms of other things, I'm starting to limit my other choices. And when I show up in a new context, I feel uncomfortable presenting in that way because I'm not an expert. So how do we increase the choice? Now, it doesn't mean we have to become more experts, but how do we let go of certain things? Now, also as part of limiting choice is when I become more of an expert, right? The research shows us that I also become less empathetic. I have less capacity to listen to what someone else might share, less capacity to get feedback. In fact, not just me, but you, the other person. As I become more of an expert, I have a more powerful role. The power dynamics start to play, and often, organizationally, the person who is reporting to me is afraid to give me feedback. Or we as leaders, or we as people with each other, we say, hey, I like what you're doing with this. We focus on the things we do good at. What is that doing? That's reinforcing my status quo. Why would I change? Why would I do anything differently? Why would I make a creative move, choose differently, shift between what I've got, if I keep getting feedback that I'm doing well. So how do we empathize, support, and then challenge each other in ways that increase our ability to choose? And that's the critical thing. So the exterior world is changing. My interior world has limited choice. We support each other, and our connection to each other is limiting us even further. As we become experts, we limit our choices of how we're going to see ourselves, our perspective of ourselves, and perspectives of each other. When you look at Harvard Business Review, the last 18 months of Harvard Business Review articles, and you just look at the front covers in the literature that we see and focus on the words that we see right there. It's talking about the exterior world and the interior world, but also a little bit differently. Me and my culture, me and my community. How do I connect in the culture within my organization, on my team? How do we change? How do we build curiosity? How do we become more agile? How do we get feedback, right? These things. So the interior and exterior and what happens. And here's another case, just to see in 2014, Microsoft acquires Nokia, and Nokia CEO gets upset, you know what? We were doing everything right, but somehow we still lost. Somehow we still got acquired. And what's happening is we have colleagues at MIT who were at Nokia at the time it was acquired by Microsoft. They remember purchasing an iPhone, right? And this person was on the team at Nokia and remembers purchasing an iPhone with his team, unscrewing the whole thing, taking the whole thing apart, looking at, we know how every component in here works, and throwing it in the trash. There's nothing new about this. And so sometimes we're so focused on what we're doing, and we get all the things on paper and on our charts, we're doing everything right. But my ability to look out beyond me, to question and challenge, am I doing this? As the exterior world is changing at speed, it allows me to have more choices and see my perspective differently. Good news, we're made to change. We're built to change, especially if anybody here has young children in their life or in some way. We see that the ability to change and mold, it's part of our DNA. It's part of our evolution. We're created this way. And, you know, John Mackey from Whole Foods would say, my ability to participate with my growth, my ability to participate with my increasing range of how I can be, how I perceive myself and others, that once I can do that, those around me can do that. My company can do that. So let's go right away. I'd love to dig into an example of some tool that we could use together. How might we work on this and start to increase our ability to choose and increase our range of what's possible for me and how I see myself? Okay, so I'd like to invite a simple tool that we can do together. And this is where I'd like to get, I go like this with my fingers. If we can get our fingers warmed up and get ready on the chat, I'd love to practice this tool live together with everyone as a way of introducing the tool, right? So we'll just do it live, right? So the tool is a 4-square, just to orient us, right? It's called the Polarity Map. And the 4-square has 4 quadrants in it. And what you see is there's an up arrow here, and I put a down arrow at the bottom. Specifically not putting plus and minus. It's not better or worse. It's just upside and downside. And on the left and the right, we can put any words there. In this case, I've started us off by putting the word innovation. So we're going to do a polarity map for the word innovation. In your context, it might be whatever challenge or way you're perceiving yourself or something you're doing. And we'll go through the example and then I'll give some more choices for what we can do in this, right? So let's, in this case, understand the map and what we're doing here with the word innovation, right? So can you identify the part of you that's an innovator? You're coming to MIT to take this 1-hour webinar together. We're innovators, right? A big part of me that's an innovator. Before we go and say, I'm an innovator, anybody identify as an innovator? Right? First, what is this question mark? What's the opposite side? What's the opposite of an innovator? So in the chat, if you can, as quickly as you can, let's harvest some words. What are the words that come to mind? A single word or phrase. What is the opposite of an innovator? What's the opposite of innovation? And let's put that right over here. On the right-hand side, the opposite of innovator is what? A replicator. Limitation. This is great. What's the opposite word, a traditionalist? Excellent. So I'm going to help us out here. So replicator, traditional, right? These are what those things, that's the opposite of innovation, right? Stationary, status quo. Absolutely. That's the opposite. Okay, I'm just going to clear the screen here. What I'd like to do is I want to put these words on the opposite side. The team at MIT is really wonderful. They're helping me out here, and we're annotating and filling this out together. So replicator, traditionalist, right? So let's put those words on the right-hand side. They're the opposite of innovation, right? So these are the words that show up here. They're the opposite of innovation. Thank you guys for putting this up together on the chat. This is incredible. And I'm loving how many people are participating. As we keep going, I'd like to go back to innovation here. And let's look at the top left quadrant. When I think about the top left quadrant, what am I talking about? The part of me that's an innovator. What's the upside of being an innovator? When you are an innovator, what's right about? Why do you do it? Why do you believe? Why do we believe innovation is so right? And what does it feel like? What does it feel like when I'm innovating? So let's come up with some words. If we can fill in the chat as quickly as we can, what are words that come up for you? What does it feel like when you're innovating? What comes up there? Let's see what comes up in the chat. The top left, challenging, excitement, growth, flourishing, absolute iconoclastic. I'm adding value. The sky is the limit. Freedom. Absolutely. It's dynamic. I'm changing with the world. I'm creative. I'm disruptive. I'm growing. Right? Absolutely. What's the upside of my relationships with people when I'm doing this? Who do I get to spend time with? What are we doing? Absolutely. Think about that in terms of relationship. What's happening for me? The upside. Why do we all want to innovate? Evolution, creating. Thank you. Thank you. This is so great. I love seeing the chat coming in. This is so great. Change, having fun, expanding, inspiring. Terrific. Okay. Now, keep going with that. I'm going to move us. Something else that we can often have a challenge with in identifying ourselves as is what's the opposite? Is there a part of you that's maybe a traditionalist? Is some aspect of your life, right? That's a replicator. What's the downside of being a replicator, of being a traditionalist? What's the downside? You know those people who are not innovators? What's the downside? They get stuck. They're unimaginative. They have a fixed mindset. This is great. They're boring, right? They're paralyzed. They're missing out. They're dull. They're far behind. Thank you. This is great. Thank you, MIT, for putting this. Is so great. They're stagnating. It's the downside of being a traditionalist is you're missing your opportunities. You're irrelevant. You're living in fear, right? They're being stressed. They're going backwards. They're beaten by, this is great. Thank you. Keep building this up. This is great. Okay. No resources. They're losing value. Okay. Now, as you're building this up, and thank you for filling this out together, the downside of not innovating, right? The downside of being a traditionalist. Is there a way, I'd like to move back to the innovation side. This might be a little trickier, but as the innovator, is there a way where you might start innovating a little bit too much, where you're doing some innovation that you start to experience? Is there a downside of being an innovator? Of the part of you when you're innovating? Yeah, people are not ready yet. Keep filling out the chat. So what's the downside? We're going to this bottom left quadrant. What's we're being too aggressive. We're taking risks. I'm losing all my personal time. I spend all my day innovating, working with teams, and right, I'm schizophrenic. I'm just going 1, 2, 3, next thing, next thing, next thing. Actionism, right? Anxiety, I'm in the unknown. It's incomprehensible. Potential losses. Now think about this also in terms of relationships. What happens to my relationships? How do I relate with others? Is there a downside to that when I'm an innovator? Loneliness, lack of trust. You're moving too fast. I might leave you behind. I'm disconnecting with you. Insecurity. Others feeling the change, and they could feel obstructive. They're unrealistic. I'm just moving too quickly, right? Wait a minute, I thought innovation was great. Why are we down here, right? What is happening, right? There's a downside of this. It's all about the hype. You just hype. It's not right? Okay, great. Now, let's move back to that traditionalist. This is not good. We can't innovate, you guys. We have to be replicators. And what's the upside? Is there an upside? Let's fill out this top right. Is there an upside to be, oh my goodness, legacy, certainty, credit? Look how, I mean, look at the speed of the chat. Look how quickly the chat's moving, right? Stability, security. Okay, comfort. Can you find that part of you? What's right about staying with tradition? Dynamic growth. I'm stable. What does it do for my relationships? What's right about, let's look at these words that are on the screen here in terms of, and in the chat in terms of our relationships. Context, respect, consistency. I trust you. We're refining. We're reliable. Thank you for filling this out, right? And I hope that as I did it together and kind of walked us through this, I hope that I was able to, in the way I was saying those words, experience, also kind of relive for myself what that feels like when I'm doing that. Because what I'd like to orient us to is that center in the yellow, that figure 8, and say that, can you identify with the part of yourself that's a traditionalist and the part of yourself that's an innovator? For example, I'm at MIT. Right now, we're innovating, we're creating things. We're building new ways of training and leadership. We're building new, okay. And then I come home, I have 2 daughters, and my wife and I say, wait a minute, there's tradition, there's history, there's things we want to make sure that we do. I am all about, there's ancestry, there's something we want to live through, right? I go right to that place, 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, right? And then I say, no, but we have to innovate, and I'm starting to create all different things and new projects. I'm working with different people, and I'm doing this thing. I say, wait a minute, Aithan, collect yourself. What are you doing? Organize yourself. And then I might go back a moment later and I find myself doing the traditional. And when I'm doing the traditional, I'm doing it both on the upside and on the downside, right? There's the fear of change. There's the fear of being, not having resources. And then there's also the upside where I'm passing something on, where I'm predictable, where I'm reliable, where because I'm part of a certain institution, there's certain things that we believe in that we can make sure that the students that graduate are bringing. When I'm part of a company and supporting organizations that we try to sustain and say, no, this is the legacy we're carrying forward. And so I find myself moving with that figure 8 all the time, and all within the span of a few minutes at times. I'm not just an innovator, I'm both. And in fact, not only do I have more choices, when I start to think of myself as both, I also have more choices in how I relate with you. Because the moment you're presenting in one way, I say, oh, in this context, you're really standing, you believe in something. It's not you're a traditionalist and I'm the innovator and we're clashing. No, in this context, I bet in other contexts, you're super innovative. So I want to, that's right. Thank you. I see in the chat, this is great. So I wonder, and thank you for participating in the chat. How do you relate? And what might you have to let go of? Might you be able to let go of to find that other part of yourself, to link up to that other part of yourself and be a pretzel? right? Recognize that I can move between those things. So I'm going to quickly here clear the drawings, and I want to move us into, pardon me, I'm just clearing my screen here. Yeah, I want to move us into this next slide, that I want to distinguish between increasing our range of choice like we just did, creativity, and changeability. I've been using these words a lot, and I want to distinguish between them. When we're talking about harnessing choice to thrive as a leader, what we're talking about is increasing the choices available for me, increasing how I perceive myself, how I perceive you, that you're not a this and I'm a that, but you're a this right now, I'm a that right now. Creativity is that yellow thing, is fluidity between choices. What do I mean? So my doctorate work was on the creative process. And one of the works in leadership is how do we invite the creative practice to be part of our cultural process together? Right? How do we work on this with each other all the time? And what do I mean is I choose this, and in a moment I choose that. That's a creative move. That's not a likely choice that I create. It's not the creative choice is the one that I'm not used to making. And it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel like a new possibility. And changeability is not the fluidity, but it's about the moment. And if changeability is the ability to make a creative choice in the context of this moment, what this moment is demanding of me. So what does that mean? Oh my goodness, a whole new set of skills. I need to be aware of what's happening in the room, aware of myself and how I normally make decisions, aware of how you're relating with me, how I'm relating with you. I have to choose that I want to listen. I have to choose that I'm going to choose perhaps something different. And I'm going to choose to engage in this place that allows everyone to be fluid and make an environment that allows myself and you to change. And ultimately, as we make different choices, we'll change individually and together. And so we want to increase our changeability. We have to increase our choice and increase our creativity. And the key, I put that word up there, practice. Each one of these is a practice. It's not like, oh, now I have more choices. We're all done. We did a polarity map. See you tomorrow. We're all set. Got this skill. The skill is the ability to keep practicing that way and being all those different things, right? Relating to myself in that different way. The skill is to practice moving fluidly. I choose this, I choose that. And the skill is awareness of the moment, right? Changeability. And what am I going to do? Which one of these choices am I going to do? And test it. And that's what creates the environment. We talk about psychological safety for us to choose differently. Because the goal isn't psychological safety. The goal, it's the means for the goal, which is where we can start to be creative together, choose differently, choose different clashing perspectives with each other, invite our ability to change ourselves, each other, team, organization, and the challenges of the world that we're here working with together. So what did we just do? What was that polarity map? One more time. What we're really practicing in that context is we're dropping our attachment to one perspective, right? I'm not just an innovator. Oh, I guess I'm a traditionalist. Wow, am I really right? In order to pick up another. I'm letting go of my control of myself and what I think. I'm just easing into that. I'm trusting something about myself, about you, that's not understood yet. And I'm taking actions that are emerging, right? That's the practice that we just got involved with together. And that's the dimensionality that we're bringing to what we're doing. We're slowing sometimes things down. It might feel like I'm slowing it down. I'm becoming more aware of my patterns, more aware of my perspective, a perspective on my perspective. And I'm wondering, what am I serving? What is the purpose and the value? What's happening right now? And when I know what that value, that purpose, that intention is, that I'm serving is, that orients my pretzel. That makes me decide which choice I'm going to do. And so my question for all of us, so in the chat, please, I'd love to hear, what might you practice letting go of? in service of your growth, in service of growing, becoming more choiceful. I'd just love to hear, as you're reflecting on this, and hopefully we've given some time since the polarity map, and just please put in the chat, exchange with each other. What might you practice letting go of? My control, my defensiveness. I just want to honor and support you in connecting with each other in this way and being for each other here. So as you're putting it in the chat, please be respectful. Please be for each other. Right? We're all in this. We want to all let go of our status quo. We want to all let go of our egos, of our judgment, of our pride, of holding our ideas that are really great, perhaps a little lighter or more lightly. Right? Being vocal. My perfectionism, right? Perfectionism. Someone put that in the chat. You could do that on a polarity map, right? So instead of the word innovation, perfectionist. What's the opposite of a perfectionist, right? Messy, right? What is that opposite? What comes up for you? And then what are the upsides and downsides? Fill out that quadrant. Categorized, right? Put that on. I'm categorized. What's the opposite? So any one of these words that are showing up right now, you can put them up on a polarity map and go through them. Pick up the different sides. Find the part of yourself that's that other thing. Which one are you least comfortable with? And this is the other part of the practice. And start to practice that quadrant that you're least comfortable with. Maybe it's the upside of being a traditionalist, right? The part of you that believes in tradition, in passing on a legacy, and no, this is right. This is stable. And maybe you're uncomfortable with that space. Maybe you're uncomfortable as the innovator. Whatever that is, practice that, because there's a moment that's going to happen where your team is doing one or the other and you say, whoa, we need more of this. And my leadership in the moment is to show up and invite more of the other by being that myself, even if I'm less comfortable. So start practicing that. Okay. How does it show up again, right? When IBM shows us that they do a business skills survey and we say in 2016, STEM is what we need. What do we see in just a few years shift? And ongoingly so, increasing in this way, with the way we saw the HBR front covers, is we need to adapt to change. We need to work in teams. We need to communicate. What are we doing right now in this context? Is increasing our individual choice, right? What else do we see? World Economic Forum, the number one skill that we need, that we're seeing that's increasingly so is being creative. What do we talk about? It's moving fluidly between having more choices, being okay with taking that, letting go of something, right? And the practices of what that feels like and holding that feeling longer, the discomfort of what that feels like. That's the skills around creativity. More than the frames and the tools that we use, frameworks to become that tools often we so focus on those things that stops us from relating and connecting to each other, that no matter how wonderful those tools are, if we're not practiced in this polarity, we'll never get there. The tools won't work. You might have the best system and process for visioning the future of a challenge. Say, like we talked about ocean plastics. You might have the greatest solution. But if you're focused on the system and you're not willing to let go and relate with each other, then that goes away. So that's what we have to work together on and invite. And my question for us is, how might I support and challenge those around me to choose differently? So what we see is now it's not in a vacuum. I have to do this with you. So what might you do? What might I let go of? I'm going to use it from the I. What might I let go of in the rigidity of my role or perspective that's stopping me from choosing differently? I could be reflective and say, what am I doing to enable others? Or how might I be hindering those around me from choosing differently? And in this case, how might I better support or challenge those around me to lean in to choosing differently? Okay, so I invite you to ask that question, write it down, check in with yourself. If you have something here that's coming up, please add it to the chat. I'd like to invite you to do that and exchange with others, because now when we exchange with that question that's on the screen, we're inviting an exchange that's actually supportive of each other choosing differently. Right? This is how we're doing in real time what you might do with your team. Okay, I'd like to shift us as we're doing this. Please fill out the chat, exchange with each other on this question. It'll give each other ideas. We're crowdsourcing here. What might I do? It's likely I have that thing. And be for each other in this way. Give each other your perspectives. Exchange. Okay, please fill that out. And I'd like to invite us to one more quick tool and practice. And I'm going to share it quickly. We can do this together. And then I want to ask you to try this on your own. I invite you to try this on your own. Try this with your team. So here's what I'd like to do. If you have a piece of paper, a blank sheet of paper, if you have a notebook, maybe fold it in half and in half again. Create 4 quadrants, or just make 2 lines on a piece of paper. We're going to do another quadrant. And what I want to invite us is a tool called adaptive cycles, right? And what I'd like to do, again, we'll fill this out together, and we're going to do quickly here about 90 seconds for each of these, right? But I'd love you to write down. We're going to do a similar, a different order. We're going to start up here on the top left. And I'd like you to write the word planting or seeding, or one of these words that's germinating, planting seeds. And I'd like you to fill out there just what things, just freely write words, phrases, sentences, things that come to mind. What are you currently in your life right now, personally and professionally, seeding? What are you seeding in your life? What are the things you are seeding? I'll describe what this tool will be used for. Hopefully it'll kind of uncover itself as we do it, but I'm purposefully not sharing it up front. We're just kind of doing it, just like the polarity map. Right? It's kind of a way into understanding things, to just kind of step in to something we don't know yet. We're actually practicing the very thing that we're suggesting. Right? It's easing into like, I don't know what he wants from me on purpose. Like we're practicing that. So what else are you seeding? Give us another 15 seconds here. And thank you for letting me speak over us in terms of time here. We're just moving quickly. I just want you to have perhaps another tool. And I'd love to work together more. So let's figure out ways. Oh, here we go, planting seeds. Now, let's move to this one. On the bottom left, I'd like you to write down the word developing or growing. What are you doing right now in your life? Professionally, personally, that you're growing. Maybe you've already planted the seeds and now you're developing it. You're putting all your efforts to growing it. Is there anything in your life that you're doing that with? Write them all down, all the things, and just let it be a free form, right? Let's take another 60 seconds with this. What are you developing? What are you growing in your life? Unbelievable. Yep, keep that going. Let's take another 15 seconds. What are you growing? And you might have an idea for what you're seeding, right? So as you say, oh, no, it's not growing. I'm going to put that back into seeding, right? Move them, shift them, cross out. Use this for a moment for yourself. A moment for yourself to really dig in, reflect. Now let's go to the top right. What are you preserving? Right, write the word preserving. And I invite you to do this in whatever language is home to you. Use this as a moment to really look inward, to reflect on what you've got. This is for you. So please use whatever language or way of writing or whatever is most valuable to you. And here we're writing, what do you want to preserve? What are you preserving right now? Maybe you've planted it, you've developed it, it's good, but right now you're working on keeping it going. You're just keeping that thing going. And your efforts are there to keep this thing moving, to conserving it, right? Conservation. So write down all those things. And again, as you do this, it might give you a different perspective or a different shift in what you're developing. That might go here, something here in the top right. Preservation might go in the bottom left. And then what you're planting seeds, of course. Right? And they all are different things, just professionally and personally. Write them all down. And again, I'll keep talking over us to give us more perspectives as we go, perhaps little cues to support us. Another 15 seconds. What are you preserving? And thank you for taking the time to do this for yourself. I really believe that the more choices you allow yourself, and this can support you with, will benefit all of us, all the 1,000+ people, the people that are on this call. And then the last one, the bottom right. Write down, what are you destroying? What are you ending? What are things that you're actively in the process of ending? They're coming to an end. You're ending them. You're the one saying, I'm going to close. And it doesn't have to be a harsh one. We can end with a bow. You know, in my background in the creative process, I spent a lot of time as an artist. 20 hours a day, sometimes 16 to 20 hours a day for 20 years, painting. And one of the big questions, even when I was mentoring other artists and in different contexts, question is, when do you end a painting? Right? When do you end a project? And I invite you to answer that for the way when do you end? How do you know when it's right to end? And how does that serve these other things that are happening? And that's the last place I want to invite us to. So as you fill this out, at this point, hopefully we've got enough time to look through these. Is there one quadrant? Like, reflect on all of them together for yourself. Is there one quadrant that feels perhaps a little too full? Right? Maybe you're starting many things, seeding many things. Maybe you're ending too many things, preserving, conserving, right? Is there one that feels too empty? Maybe it doesn't have anything in it. You are like pulling, what am I doing that's actually, right? Maybe is there something there? I invite you to reflect on that. And also to reflect, is there something you want to move from one quadrant to another quadrant? You wish it was in a different quadrant. It's not. And what I want to invite is that same figure 8 that we looked at from the polarity map. That hopefully what this tool can help us with is that we have a lot of choices, right? That we have a lot of choices and we can creatively move between them. What do I mean here? Is that you can move things from one quadrant to another, and it's not linear. We often think of projects or something that I'm doing in my personal life, professional life, a career trajectory is a straight line. No, it's not. We know this, right? And so this thing, this curved line that we eventually notice ourselves in might feel awkward and uncomfortable. But then I took away the line altogether and I say, okay, what am I doing in different ways, quadrants? And there's a lot of different things that I'm growing, a lot of different, and ending one thing can support growing another thing. And so we can see that they're all happening at once. It's not linear, only linear, right? We have more choices, right? And that we can move freely between them. So hopefully that's helpful for you and your personal and professional life. So it's another tool, another way to do that. And so what I want to add is that hopefully you can find yourself in that figure 8 and want to add to this other chart that we were looking at with the polarity map. All these apply. You're dropping your attachment to one perspective. You're letting go of your control. This is this. This looks like this. I am only the person who seeds things, or I'm only the one who ends things, or my role is to conserve, right? And then you're trusting something that is not understood yet. It will change and it will move to a different quadrant. It just will. You're going to take actions without a guaranteed outcome. In a world that's changing, my perspective on myself in this way, my ability to grow my choices and how I am and how I can relate with you and how you are, that we can connect in this more fluid, creative way, that's what's going to get us to solve problems and bring all our expertise and all the frameworks and all the wisdom that we have in our functional expertise. And that's the last part that hopefully this can add, this different the polarity map that this adaptive cycles can add is staying with the tension of, am I this or am I that, or what's growing and what's seeding, and to stay with the discomfort of the things that we're looking at right here, of trusting something not understood yet, of the emergence, right? Not guaranteed outcome. And oftentimes, another thing that limits our choice is we want to resolve. When I feel uncomfortable, let's go right to the answers. Can we find a solution? How quickly can we get to a solution? And that, because we're in the discomfort of it's changing really fast, I need to make a choice. Go. This is the best choice. This is the right choice. And so the longer we can, and hopefully you've experienced a little bit, even in our short time, of slowing down, increases our choices, because that not being able to live with that tension limits our choice, because we go right for an answer, ourselves and for our team. So that's the other thing you're practicing, is staying with the tension. So I'd like to bring us and close us and kind of recap what we talked about with one other kind of maybe experience or perspective, right? Just a way to say. So when you look at this image, and this can hopefully recap again, review everything that we've kind of discussed. What is the thing you see in the first 7 seconds? We've already passed 7 seconds here, right? What do you see? And with a retina scan on people's eyes, we see that most people who look at this image in the first 7 seconds see this. You see that yellow line? That's what we're looking at, right? It's the 7 to 8% in the center of this image. Makes sense, right? I don't know what I'm looking at. What is this? I'm looking right at the center, right? And we did this experiment, has been done with people who are experts. What do we mean by experts? They're involved in the arts, they're creative, they're involved in some practice in the arts. And what they see in the first 7 seconds of looking at this is this on the right. They see 70 to 80% of that same image. And it's unpredictable and chaotic. What do we mean by unpredictable and chaotic? Is that each person sees a different 70 to 80% of that image, right? So when that's your experience of that team, of looking at something, what is happening there? Now, after spending a few hours, 3 hours together, doing what we just did now, unpacking, reflecting, seeing, practicing in these ways, after 3 hours of doing that, you look at the same image, look at what happens to people in this context. So this person that was looking in this way on the left-hand side, that saw this 7% in the center, is starting to see what we see on the bottom left. Look at that change in the first 7 seconds of looking at this image. Now there's an increase on this person as well, on the right-hand side, the art person. But look at the drastic opening up of what they're seeing. And I'm going to invite us to unpack what's happening here. And one thing that for me shows up is that what vision is not what I see. The picture hasn't changed. The painting hasn't changed, but it's something about how I see myself, how I see things around me. I am more choiceful. And harnessing choice is increasing, wait, I can see this, I can see that. What happens in those 3 hours? We're increasing the range of what's available to us in any context, right? And we're moving fluidly between our choices, creativity, and changeability. We're engaging in the demands of the moment and how I have to be, because I have more choices for how I present myself, is going to be different in context. So maturing leadership, just reviewing, is harnessing choice to thrive as a leader. Seeing myself and my way of relating with others differently. I really appreciate having the time together. Thank you for this short time together, and hopefully it opened up some ideas. I'll pass it back to Rob and MIT. Thank you for making the time today, and hopefully to see you soon in future courses.
Aithan, thank you so much. What a wonderful hour with you, and so thought-provoking and insightful in terms of what we can bring to the tables as individual leaders. Thank you also to all our participants today for being so engaged. What a wonderful use of the chat box and the question box. So At MIT, we're very much committed to action learning and working with you. And I got a sense from this wide global audience today that you were right there with us, contributing in a very thoughtful way. We do still have a few minutes left. If you'd like to submit some questions to the Q&A box, we'll do our best to get them. I know a few of you have already submitted some questions. One question, as I kind of reviewed that kind of came to surface, Aithan, you mentioned the tensions that exist, and I think kind of at an individual level as a leader, there are tensions that exist, but also probably within an organizational context too. And one of our participants today noted that we'll always be fighting a battle of traditionalists. I think historically leadership has been framed as kind of an unwavering vision, kind of that singular purpose. And we can see the limits of that based on what you're saying. But how would you approach getting an organization to think more along the lines of being open to harnessing choices to thrive?
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Rob. That's a great question. So the individual starts to become the individual organization, and the individual organization in context to a changing world instead of me and my team, right? So we're just shifting to this broader range. And I love that question about how would you support an organization or, suggest to an organization. I think that vision, that North Star, doesn't need to change. In fact, that North Star is not perhaps what's shifting. And that North Star, and it's critical that North Star be about a value, about a purpose, about what I want to see in the world, and be wide and broad enough for me then, if I'm following, using the metaphor of a North Star, the terrain to get there is what might shift. Right? Say, well, I want to get there, but now I've got a mountain, I've got to go around, this is slippery, that's sticky, these are challenges. So in that context, it's saying, what are the choices that I have to get to that North Star? And there's a bunch of examples of organizations that stick to what they're doing and say, okay, COVID just happened. How am I going to make a choice that's different, but to still provide that thing that matters the most to me, to our organization, to what we believe in? And it might shift something as simple to a different type of service or a different way of engaging my customer. But as the customer needs are changing, what I'm offering them might still be that same vision. And so the invitation, I think, as a practice for an organization is to really orient to what are the values and the purpose and what do we want to see in the world, and make it really core about that, and then make the practices and the ways we do that flexible. And there's tons of frameworks that we can use and practices we can use around that. But in simple, I think that would be, in simple terms, quick terms, I think that would be my suggestion. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. I've seen several notes, people coming in for follow-up recommendations, books or resources, how they can dive deeper into this or follow up. And I know one thing that we mentioned is you do have an upcoming program. I think we shared the link earlier in the chat box, and I think we have a slide as well that gives details. But we encourage you to explore possibly taking this program in December. But in addition to that, we also have resources that are available on the executive education website. So that's certainly a kind of a something that's coming up very quickly and very accessible for all to visit our website. But Aithan, any final thoughts or suggestions for resources for people to follow up on this and learn more?
I mean, one of the key things that we spoke about way early on was Robert Keegan, and his works, maybe an Everybody Culture would be a great book for people who are interested to discuss there. Another place in terms of, we spoke about culture part, where it's from the individual to the collective, I would say The Culture Code by Dan Coyle. It's another great book. And then there's scholarly articles, and I'd love to connect with people longer and in more depth in this course that you've got on the screen. And lastly, just to say is that this work is hard. What I'm inviting us into here is a real hard thing to do. And to not be discouraged with how hard that is and the challenges in there, but may the hard work that you do be something that benefits all of us. And so I'm just, with that, I hope yeah, I'm grateful to be together.
Well, that's wonderful. Aithan, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you from around the world that have joined us. Just a brief reminder that we do have another webinar coming up, I believe, with Michael Siegel on measuring cyber risk during global change. Michael is part of our faculty that teaches in our cybersecurity programs, both live online and in our asynchronous or self-paced online learning module as well. That webinar will be coming up October 12th at 12 p.m. noon Eastern time. We certainly hope to see you back for that, and we would welcome you and hope to see you in our MIT classrooms, either online or at some point back on the campus soon. Aithan, thank you again. Thank you to the MIT team for all their wonderful program support in this webinar today, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much.